Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen-Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a Millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 44. This is Spinal Tap, movie review. Hey, Chris McBrien here, along with Yancy Eaton. Yancy, it is the beginning of summer. Tomorrow is Canada Day, July 1st, here in Canada, so I'm very, very excited about that. But kicking off the summer, my kids are done school, so I decided I would be a very nice dad. And this afternoon, I thought I would take them to an afternoon movie. And so they both wanted to go see Cars 3. And I know that you are a humongous fan of Pixar, right? You love
Correct.
their work. You love all the stuff that they do. That movie sucked. It was awful.
Let's get right to it.
Awful movie, Cars 3. And the thing is that like it's not just like okay, so I'm watching the movie and I'm thinking, man, they just gave up on this. They just gave up. It's just like they threw in the towel on this movie. And it's not like, well, we did one, we did two, now we're kind of losing it, because it doesn't work like that with Pixar. In fact, it works the opposite. If you look at Toy Story 3 is the best. One of the best animated films I've ever seen in my life. Definitely the best of that series. So that one got better. This one got worse. It was so bad. At one point, I'm sitting there. I got my son on my one side. My wife is on the other side. And my wife nudges me and she goes, "You're snoring." I'm not even making this up. I actually fell asleep and was snoring.
Yeah, I've seen some of the reviews and stuff too, and I've read a couple articles from people who get paid to do this for a living, and the first Cars was phenomenal, and the second Cars was kind of a departure from that, and they introduced different characters and kind of, I don't know, it was an okay movie, but yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but what you're basically saying is that sentiment is repeated by lots of people who are saying that it doesn't even feel like a Pixar film. This just feels like a really cheap money grab where there wasn't a lot of effort in it, and that Pixar, quote unquote magic that normally goes into their films just isn't there. So that's kind of disappointing. I'm sorry to hear that you hated it so much. I
didn't read anything about it going in. I knew nothing about the movie going in. I didn't know what it was about, anything. And I just was shocked at the lack of plot in the movie, the lack of characters in the movie, even the lack of scenes. It was like nothing happens. I'm like, we're an hour into this movie and nothing's happened. I don't get it. I don't understand. The idea is that Lightning McQueen is getting older and the younger generation's taking over, kind of like on this podcast, Yancy. And but the younger people were kind of moving up and taking over the rookies. So I mean, the concept made sense, but it was very, very poorly executed. Anyway, sorry to break it to you, because I know you like Pixar, but that movie sucked. Oh God, it was awful. Anyway, we got much better things to get to this week. So you ready to get going?
Yep. Before we do, I just very quickly want to wish a very happy birthday to my oldest sister, Ashley. She occasionally listens to the podcast, not all of the time, but in either event, happy 32nd birthday. I don't know if she wanted me to divulge her age, but it is her birthday, and I hope she has a good one. So let's get into it.
Happy birthday, Ashley. On that note, let's get started. It's AT-ATs, not AT-ATs.
I do understand your reasoning with the whole hype in.
So maybe it's an American thing, AT-ATs. I don't know.
I refuse to accept that, to be honest with you.
I'm going to go all the way to the top if I have to.
Until I hear it from George Lucas's mouth.
And we'll get an answer. But
I don't have anything to back it up.
It seems pretty conclusively that it's AT-ATs, not AT-ATs.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. Okay, so this week I made you watch the Gen X classic. This is Spinal Tap. And just to preface it a little bit, you and I have known each other for a lot of years. And I remember when we did our old podcast, I had mentioned Spinal Tap on there. And you even back then, a couple of years ago, you were like, yeah, people have been telling me for years I got to watch this movie. And I just never do. And I've never watched it. So coming into tonight, you watch the movie. First impressions. Go.
First impressions. I honestly thought I was going to enjoy this movie a lot more than I did. Going back to some of the movies that we've watched in the past, they're kind of in the same ilk as these, as far as a comedy and just ad-libbing and all that stuff throughout the film. I don't think this is a bad film, but it did not resonate with me, or I did not find it nearly as funny as the other films, and I was really disappointed in that, because I thought this being the world of music and record labels and touring rock bands, I thought I would have identified with this a lot more than I did some of the other films.
Yeah, because you like music and you like musicians.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the realness of it, because I think that even though it was, a parody, and they were basically trying to, emulate what real life is like, with these big rock bands and the label industry and stuff. But I just felt like there was this disconnect with me where I felt it wasn't all the jokes that they were trying to put out there. It didn't really land. And, what's the one line where they talk about in the film where it says it's such a fine line between being stupid and clever?
Yes.
To me, there were moments when I thought it was incredibly clever and I did enjoy it. But there was just a handful of moments where I actually found myself laughing out loud. Whereas, like on Airplane or Blazing Saddles, I laughed throughout the entire movie. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of a disappointment to me, but I can see why it resonated so much with people, as like a cult film later. It didn't do very well at the box office early on. But to be honest with you, it kind of felt a little dated, and a lot of the dialogue just didn't really hit with me.
Yeah, no, I can understand what you're saying, and I get it, because one of the things is, for a millennial to watch a movie like this is a little bit of a shock, because it looks, it looks kind of cheap. Right? I mean, it's shot on handheld cameras. I know there was a lot of problems during the production. Like, people were like, what is this handheld? So you got to, where's the cameraman needs to, keep it straight, but that was the whole point. They wanted to make it look like a documentary, like it was behind the scenes. So I can understand, a Gen Xer who's good, or sorry, a Gen Xer, a millennial who's used to, like, big flashy movies and CGI and all this getting thrown into this world and go, whoa, what is this? But yeah, like, the thing is, like, for me, is that you make a couple good points. So number one, the movie was not very well received when it came out. It made $4 million at the box office, basically bombed, and it only cost $2 million to make, so I mean, they made money, but it didn't make a lot of money. Nobody knew what the hell to make of it. They were like, what is this? Is this real? Is this fake? And it wasn't until it wasn't until the advent of the home video, right, that things kind of took off for that movie. And I mean, I know it's hard for you to believe as a millennial, but there was a time, Yancy, when the only way that you could actually consume a film, you could watch them, was actually going to the movie theater. Like, that was it, right? So then all of a sudden home video came out, and it came right around this time. And so what people did was, we would get a couple of movies and just watch them over and over and over again. And this was one that, for me personally, that I got. It was one of the first movies that I ever got, because I saw it on the movie channel. I didn't go to see it in the theater. Saw it on the movie channel, and I just loved it right away. I just loved the concept of the improv and stuff. And so I would watch it over and over again with a VCR tape, VHS. And I think a lot of other people did too in this generation. So you had a couple of moments you said that you laughed at. Any stick out for you that you want to share?
I think the one part where they were being interviewed and they were talking about reviews that the band had gotten.
Isn't that great?
That it's probably the best. I mean, what was it? They were talking about treading water in a sea of retarded sexuality and bad poetry.
Yeah.
I want that like on my tombstone or something. Like, I thought it was so perfect. I hope that was, completely made up on the spot like that, because I thought it was absolutely perfect. But
it was, and sorry to jump in. The other thing during that scene, those reviews that Rob Reiner, Marty DeBerge, was reading to them, that was the first time that they heard it. So
really?
It was an improvised scene, and that was the first. So that was as the actors, that was the first time they were hearing the reviews. And if you go back and watch it, they're barely holding it together. They're barely holding it together during that scene because they're hearing it. My favorite one was the review that they got for Shark Sandwich, which was basically just a 2-word review from the Rolling Stone. Sandwich. They're like, oh, they didn't print that. We can't print that.
or what was the other one? What day did God create Spinal Tap? And couldn't he have just rested that day too?
Because that was the review for the Gospel According to Spinal Tap album.
Yeah, I thought that was that part was perfect. There was a couple of other scenes, like one of the scenes where they're performing and they have what looks like, the band goes through these progressions where it's constantly adapting and changing. It shows them whenever they first formed as a band. They're almost like the Mamas and the Papas or like the Byrds, back in 1969.
They were very folk band or something. Remember, like, give me some money. And then they were on TV, the flower people.
and then it shows them, more present time, and it's almost like a Black Sabbath concert or something where like they have like these plastic looking like alien pods that they're trying to come out of, and the one guitarist can't get out, and he's trying to break out of this.
The bass player can't get out.
Exactly, at the very end of the performance, he finally comes out whenever they're all supposed to like go back into their little something like that. It's stupid, but I really enjoyed that.
But those are the things, though, Yancy, that if it, like, as you're a musician yourself, right? And so you can relate to musicians. And the thing is that it was those little things like that made the movie resonate, right? Because I think real musicians watched this movie and went, Oh my God, I've been there. I've been at those concerts. We've done shows like that. Like when you tour, 300 days out of a year, stuff like this is going to happen, and it does happen, right? And it cuts really, really close to the bone. I remember there was a couple of real musicians that watched the movie for the first time when it came out, and were quite, sort of moved by it. I remember Ozzy Osbourne. He was one. He thought it was real. And he was like, "This is real." I mean, now, for what it's worth, Ozzy Osbourne doesn't even know his own name half the time. You know what I mean? So there's that.
Right.
But I mean, he thought it was real. I remember reading that the Edge and Tom Waits both cried when they saw the movie. They actually cried
because they thought it was spot on.
Just because it was just so spot on, and they knew what it was like to be the band that was questioning itself and thinking, "Am I good enough? Am I good enough? I'm not good enough to do this, like we're falling apart, things aren't going our way." And they've been there, and they've been through that, so that it really resonated close to the bone.
I do think there's one interesting part with that, not to cut you off, but this is a comedy and it is meant to be a parody, but in a weird alternate universe, I think you could have actually seen this film being some sort of like an actual movie. Like there's a real story there, and I think it all kind of it encircles identity and how like this band saw themselves versus how the public saw them, and how they get a taste of fame, and they do allow that to distort them, and they do lose their identity. And just seeing like their music progression, how they'll say they don't want to stay stale throughout the entire career, and towards the end of the movie they talk about like, we don't really want to be 45 like up here on the stage, like doing the same old burnt out tunes and getting in the same patterns and stuff. And so like through their whole career, every single time you see them on stage, they're doing something completely different. There's different props, different costumes, their entire genre of music changes. Like I mentioned, one time they sound like the Byrds or the Mamas and the Papas, and they sound like Black Sabbath, or they sound like Poison. They become like a hair band. Like they never really got a sense of truly who they were. And I think you're going to find that with a lot of people who are in show business, because the desire to be famous almost always outweighs the desire to create something original and speak, and actually say something meaningful that's kind of bigger than the band itself. So like I said, I think they kind of touched on that, but they never fully embraced that. I think if this movie had like a sequel and they were somehow able to bring the entire cast back and do it that way, I would have been really, really interested in that. That was one part that they kind of teased that they never really jumped into. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. One of the things for me is that how this movie fooled a lot of people. Okay, like I said, there was musicians that were fooled that actually thought that this band was real. The audience did too. I remember Spinal Tap then actually got together and did concerts after this movie came out. I remember there was one time, I don't remember when it was, I'd have to Google it and look it up. I was in university, and I remember reading that Spinal Tap was flying across the world and basically in one day doing like 3 different concerts. Like all in the same day, like, because it was like this big thing. They were playing all over the place. Like these guys actually got together and made a band out of it for a while, and they actually put an album out after this. So like it was just crazy. But the thing was, they were able to fly under the radar and fool a lot of people because of who was involved. But when you look back on it, even that they shouldn't have fooled people. But like Rob Reiner, for example, he was the best known of the group. Like he was Michael Stivic on Meathead. On All in the Family. And his dad is like the legendary Carl Reiner. So, I mean, he was well known. Like, and that's Rob Reiner. And at the beginning, he's like, "Hi, I'm Marty DeBerge." And so people should know, okay, that he's playing a part. But they still didn't get it. Like, but I mean, the band themselves, they were pretty much unknown. Like Michael McKean, who was probably the best known of those actors at the time, because he was known for playing Lenny. Of Lenny and Squiggy on Laverne and Shirley. So back in those days, you've heard of Laverne and Shirley.
Yep, of
very,
course.
very, very popular show in the 70s, spun off of Happy Days. And so he was on that. But he looked totally different because he was a greaser in that show. And now here, all of a sudden, he's got this long hair, this wig, and he's playing the lead guitar player. Harry Shearer, at this point, he was a bass player. He hadn't done The Simpsons yet. So he was unknown. Christopher Guest, it wasn't until a couple years later that Christopher Guest played the Six-Fingered Man in The Princess Bride, so nobody really knew him. So I think they were able to fly under the radar, like I said, and fool a lot of people, which was part of the charm of the movie. Was the fact that really at the heart of it, this is a band that is kind of a bunch of unknowns. You know what I mean? They're holding on to some glory that they never even really had in the first place.
With a hyper elevated sense of self-worth and importance that's justified. You know what
exactly. I mean? And so they weren't ever a big deal. And I think it was perfect because, they were played by a bunch of guys who were not very well known. So they were able to kind of fly under the radar. One of the things that, like, a lot of the Gen X movies that I want you to watch, and I, implore you to watch for the show, is the fact that the influence that they've had. And, like, this movie had a lot of influence on movies to come. Like Christopher Guest basically went on to make a bunch more of these kind of mockumentary movies, like Waiting for Guffman. Have you ever heard of Waiting for Guffman?
I have not.
Or
no.
Best in Show or A Mighty Wind?
I've heard of Best in Show.
Best in Show is it's about the dog at the Westminster Dog Show. It's about these people that just love dogs and so. But it's a mockumentary, and it's directed by Christopher Guest. Like, he kind of find his niche. You really should watch Waiting for Guffman. Waiting for Guffman is really, really, really funny, and it's basically this mockumentary about this small town theater troupe that wants to put on this play and go to Broadway, and it's just it's pretty funny too. But yeah, no, like I say, I thought the movie was really sort of. I don't want to say groundbreaking, but I mean, like, it was definitely influential. It was a different take on how to make movies, and it was a different take on how to do something different. But the funny thing is, though, is I think a lot of people look at this movie and they look at Spinal Tap and they say this is like the first mockumentary movie ever made, but really it wasn't. And in fact, it wasn't even the first rockumentary that was ever made. Of course, meaning like a fake documentary about a rock band. The very first one took place back in 1978, and it's called The Ruddles. Have you ever heard of that before?
You're getting into the really deep rarities and B-sides. I've never heard of.
There are Gen Xers out there that are going to know what I'm talking about, Yancy. I want you to look into this. So, Lorne Michaels on Saturday Night Live, right? Back in the 70s. He starts up...
Yep, of course.
One of the things he wanted to do was back in like 77, 78, because the show started to really pick up steam. Belushi, Aykroyd, and all that. The show was picking up steam, right? It was popular. SNL was. And so Lorne Michaels reached out to the Beatles, and he said to the Beatles, I will pay you guys $1 million if you come to New York and reform for one performance on Saturday Night Live. And it became kind of a thing on the show. It was like this recurring bit and all this. And then they couldn't get the Beatles to reform and come on. But what they did was, on one of the episodes, they said, oh no, we couldn't get the Beatles, but they sent over some tape of another band that's big in England, and they're called the Ruddles. And so they were like, and it was like this sort of like this tape that they played on SNL was like this about this band. It was like this sort of mockumentary about this band that didn't exist, that was kind of a spoof of the Beatles. And that bit was so popular, and amazing too, by the way, that they went ahead and made a full-length mockumentary about the band. So, if anyone out there that liked Spinal Tap or liked this sort of genre, you got to find a copy of The Ruddles and watch. It is brilliant. It's done by Eric Idle. And the cast of SNL, the original cast, like Belushi, Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray, and Neil Innes, this guy, he writes the songs for it. The songs are so spot on. It's supposed to be like a parody of the Beatles, but in some cases, some of those songs are as good as the Beatles songs that they're trying to parody. Amazing stuff. But anyway, that's another. And another one, too, that comes to mind in terms of a mockumentary that actually came out before this was Zelig by Woody Allen. It came out like in 83, a year before Spinal Tap. So it wasn't even the first of its kind, but I definitely think it definitely had some influence on other ones. What about, did you notice any cameos as you're watching the movie? You notice anybody that kind of popped up throughout the movie? There was a lot.
You're going to completely ruin my entire trivia question section. But yeah, I did notice some cameos. I had to go back, and I'll admit, whenever I was looking through the IMDb page, just trying to get names of, sometimes you forget characters' names and stuff while you're watching the film, or you can't remember this part or that part. I was going through it, and I would see names, and I'm like, wait, what? And like, I literally had to go back through, and I'm skimming trying to find them, or I would go on YouTube and look for these particular scenes where they were in, because I completely missed the fact that this very famous person is actually in the film. But yes, I did notice a little bit of that, but like I said, I'm afraid you're going to ruin.
I won't go into candy cameos then with you now. We'll leave it for the trivia part of the show. One that I will mention, though, is one of my favorites from WKRP in Cincinnati. Howard Hessman is in the movie, and he's the manager of Duke Fame. Remember, they run into him in the lobby, and they run into this guy Duke Fame. That's all, and Duke Fame himself, by the way, was actually played by Paul Shortino, who is the lead singer for Rough Cut, and he just has a little cameo there. And then Howard Hessman is like his manager or whatever.
Was this the part whenever they act like they like him and they
they're like,
what a wanker.
It is like, oh, what a wanker, what a wanker. Yeah. Oh yeah, they were still booing him when we came on stage. Remember that? They're like, yeah, exactly. So was there some scenes that stuck out to you? What any scenes that you liked of the movie? I know overall you didn't really love the movie, but there must have been a few scenes.
Yeah, I didn't love I do think there are definitely some redeeming qualities and scenes to it. I love Nigel as a character. I think I would have loved it if he were more a part of it, where they actually explored the fact that he is kind of trained, like he was classically trained, and there was the one scene where like he's playing this really, really beautiful piano piece, and he's like, oh, this is in D minor, and every time you hear it, just makes you want to weep. And he's like, oh, well, what's the name of this piece? He's like, oh, I call it Lick My Love Pump.
Oh, my.
So it's just like, it's like he can be like the artsy, type of, really educated musician, but he's also like at the heart of like who he is. He's just like a child. You know what I mean? I thought Fran Drescher's part, Bobby Fleckman. Man, I wish she was in the movie so much more. She, for one, incredibly lovely. I've never seen pictures of her when she was younger acting like that, but literally one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. Did not expect that, but her character was so interesting and so strong, and like was just so good at kind of like playing off where like she's not taking any of the band's BS, and was like so straightforward and kind of tells it like it is. Like a strong woman in films like that early on were kind of rare, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And when she was in, one of my favorite scenes too was when they're going to release their album, and then it's called "Smell the Glove." And then remember, they wanted to put it out, and then she's like, "You can't put that out. You put a grease naked woman on all fours with a dog collar on her neck, and you had her, you had a guy's hand sticking out with a black glove in her face for her to sniff it. Like, what the hell is that? You can't do that." And then my favorite line then. The manager goes, "Well, you should have seen the cover they wanted to do. It wasn't a glove, believe me." Yeah. Like, I don't know. There was so many good parts in that movie. But yeah, no, she was really good. I thought that was. Any other scenes that kind of stood out to you?
I like the very end as the credits were rolling. Whenever they're talking to the, let me go back a little bit. When they're talking he's interviewing the one of many drummers in the film when he's laying in the bathtub. Oh, yeah. And he's talking about, like, how does it feel, knowing that all these drummers have died? Like, are you worried? And he's like, well, it's not likely it's going to happen to me. Like the law of averages. Oh, yeah, the law of averages. Like, that's his justification for the fact that he's not going to die.
Because they've been through like 6 drummers already or whatever. Or like 37 people have been in this band so far. 37. Exactly. What about Stonehenge? Did you like the Stonehenge part?
The Stonehenge part was probably the funniest part of the entire thing.
He writes it down 18 inches on the napkin, and then she makes it. You know? Oh, I thought that was good. And then, go ahead with Stonehenge.
He's thinking it's literally like an 18-inch, just a diagram of what the larger thing is going to be. Right. And no, that's literally what she built.
Yeah, he's like, when do we get the real piece? Yeah. She's like, this is it. Yeah. And the cool thing for me, like, I mean, that scene is like one of the most famous scenes in the movie, right? And one of the things I liked about how they did it, though, was that they let the audience in on the joke before the band finds out. Right? Because Ian's meeting with Angelica Houston's character, right? And then he's like really mad that she got this wrong, right? And then they decide to go ahead and use the prop anyway. But the band doesn't know. But the audience knows. So they're out there and they're playing their song, and then it gets lowered from the rafters. And of course, it's in danger of being trod upon by a dwarf. And then my favorite part is after the scene's over, and they're all kind of sitting in the dressing room, and they're doing sort of a post-mortem on what went wrong, and they're going through it all, and then finally there's silence. And then Derek Smalls puts down his pipe and goes, he's like pondering things. And he goes, well, the real question is, are we going to do Stonehenge tomorrow night? They're like, no, we're not going to do Stonehenge tomorrow night. I love that. And of course, what about the scene where the amplifiers go to 11? One of the most famous scenes in the movie, too.
But this goes to 11.
Yeah, exactly. These all go to 11. And then, when you're on 10 on your guitar, you're on 10 on your amp, and you want to go higher, where's it go? Nowhere to go. 11. And then, of course, the director's like, well, why don't you just make 10 louder? Make that louder, and then you're good to go. And it's just so funny because in character, he just ponders it for a second. Oh, these go to 11. Like, he just doesn't have an answer for it, right? Like, it's so good. I don't know. And even as a musician, I thought it was interesting when they do the song Big Bottom, and they're on stage singing about, talking about mud flaps, My Girl's Got 'Em, Big Bottom, and all that stuff. And I don't know if you noticed, but they're all of them are playing bass guitars. They're not actually. Yes, I did. All 3 of them are playing bass guitars because it's Big Bottom, right? I don't know. I just thought that was kind of. That was clever. Also, the scene. I don't know if you noticed. There was a scene where they interviewed, and they've all got cold sores, and they've all got a cold sore. You mean
herpes? Yes.
Yeah. They've all got it, and it's actually from a deleted scene that was in the movie because they actually all slept with the lead singer of their opening act. That was part of the. Then they ended up cutting it, but they left in the scene, but they all got the cold sore from her. The movie is probably best known for the quotes. So did any quotes stand out to you?
The fine line between stupid and clever. I'm gonna start using that daily, like in my regular vernacular. That's a quote that I just love so much. I think it's perfect. Like you mentioned, some of the songs, like the "Sex Farm Woman," "I'm gonna mow you down." Like I got to find some way to incorporate that and just like daily conversations with my wife. I love the part whenever they're interviewing the bassist during the credit sequence at the very end, and he's basically talking about how basically like a preserved moose, and they're like, so you feel like a preserved moose on stage, or
Yep.
Or then he's describing like the two characters. We have these two huge personalities, these two different visions, these visionaries for our team, for our band. Like one's like fire and ice, and I'm kind of like lukewarm water, which he doesn't even realize that how insulting that sounds to himself. But in his mind, that makes just perfect sense. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's an anti joke, but it just works for me. I love like really clever wordplay like that. It was set up really well. What about you? Did you have any other ones that kind of stuck
there's
with
so
you?
many quotes, and I like when they're talking about what happened to your first drummer, and they're like, oh, he died in a bizarre gardening accident.
I actually wrote that down.
Yeah, authorities said best leave it unsolved, really, And then when he's asking him about his name, David St. Hubbins. St. Hubbins, you can tell it's totally improvised too. Like, St. Hubbins, that's an unusual name. Like, where does that mean? He goes, was there a St. Hubbins? And he's like, yeah, he was the patron saint of quality footwear. And like just stupid stuff like that. I like the scene too when he's showing him all the guitars. We were just talking about when these go to 11. I like when he goes like picks up the guitar, doesn't plug it in. And he's showing, like, Nigel's got it, right? And he's like, listen to the sustain in this guitar. The sustain's so good. And Marty's like, I don't hear anything. Well, if I were playing it, you would. Like just stupid stuff like that.
And then he's like, don't even look at it.
Yeah, you can't look. You can't play this. Ever, you don't even look at it. And then I also like when the director says, I've noticed that a large proportion of your audience is made up of predominantly young boys. Why is that? And then they go on to say, well, because we're on stage wearing tight trousers and we've got armadillos on our trousers, and the girls, they run away screaming. And it's just like, it's quite frightening for them. Like, just like that. I don't know. I felt like all those, it was just that kind of rock and roll stuff. Even the way when he goes through the airport, and it's going off, and she's like, do you have any artificial plates or limbs? He's like, nah, not really. And he takes out the cucumber wrapped in tinfoil. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just so much of it was funny. But a lot of it, like I say, it cuts to the bone, and I thought it was clever all around. One thing I did want to mention was Tony Hendra. So he plays Ian, the band manager in it. And the thing was, like, he's probably like the least known of all the guys, but he was actually like a pretty important guy to have in that movie, because he was really involved with National Lampoon in the 70s. He co-wrote and directed the stage play Lemmings. And for anybody that's big into like 70s comedy, they know exactly what Lemmings is. It was done by National Lampoon. Actors like Belushi and Chevy Chase were in it before they were on SNL. And Tony Hendra co-wrote that with Sean Kelly, who went on to do Caddyshack. And well, that's, of course, one of me and Caveman's favorite movies. And Hendra also co-created, you ever heard of a show called Spitting Image? It was with these puppets. No. It's like they had these puppets and they look like real celebrities. And Tony Hendra kind of did that. But the big thing was with Tony Hendra, like behind the scenes in the comedy world, is he's the guy that introduced John Belushi to cocaine. Or at least that's what Bob Woodward mentioned in his book Wired. So like it's just, I don't know, just all around, I just love this movie. One question I have before we go on. I mentioned, before, like, the movie's mostly improvised. I think that's really, really cool. I also think it was cool that they actually spent years developing these characters and their backstories so that the improv had like some sort of grounding to it. But one of the things that was going on, I don't know if you picked it up or not, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to Spinal Tap, but I want to know your opinion on this. Do you think that, so Nigel Tufnell and David St. Hubbins, do you think Nigel Tufnell had a crush on David St. Hubbins? I think there's been some debate amongst people that really love this movie as to whether or not that was going on, because he was very jealous of David's girlfriend Janine and all that, and I think he was kind of crushed by things. I just wonder if that's something that kind of always stood out to me. I don't know.
I mean, I guess it can make sense. I would just take that as like, with her trying to supplant what was his name, Faith, as the band's manager. Right. That just seems like a natural move where like a girl who's close to the band tries to like insert herself into that, and he saw this like a power move where two people in charge in the band are now some of the most visible, and I don't know if that necessarily
kind
meant
of a Yoko Ono moment, right, for the band, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was I don't know, that's kind of some weird fan theory. I'd have to go back through. I mean, it makes sense. I'm not going to dispute it, but I think if you'd ask the actors, they maybe they would divulge if that was the case.
Well,
I don't know.
Okay, well, years have gone by. You finally had a chance to watch the movie. We always ask this at the end of after we've watched it and talked about it a little bit. Out of 10, what would you give the movie?
So I wasn't in love with the film, but I will acknowledge that it was an above average film. It was interesting, and the theme that it kind of was trying to, the thing that it was making fun of, I think was pretty effective. I would give it maybe like a 6.8, not quite a 7, but an above average film. It's a pretty good film.
No, that's okay. All right. Well, we've got our talk out of the way. We've got our rating out of the way. It's time now to have some
fun with Yancy.
Okay, so you're going to give me some trivia on this movie, right?
Yep, I'm going to try.
All right. Well, give me a shot and see what happens.
Okay, so at the very beginning, when you see the film director, and he is basically introducing the film and talking about the band, he gives 3 qualities that he admires about Spinal Tap at the very beginning. The 3 are their exuberance, their raw power, and their blank. What is it?
Oh, is it their... Oh, I don't know.
It's their exuberance, their raw power, and their punctuality.
Their punctuality. Oh, jeez.
Which was just really weird to me. But okay, so the band, when they were talking about their inception, they talked about their name, what their first name was, which was the Originals. And then, of course, they discovered that they're not the originals, which I thought was really funny. And so then they decided to change their name. And what did they change their name to?
They became the New Originals.
All right. So the band, let me rephrase this. You're right. You kind of caught me in this. Okay. So they became the New Originals, and then the band that was the Originals changed their name to what?
I don't remember. So the originals changed their name to something else. I don't remember what they changed it to.
Yeah, they changed it to the Regulars.
Oh, the Regulars. Okay.
Right. So you had the Originals, the New Originals, and then the Originals changed their name to the Regulars. And at that point, the New Originals decided it wasn't worth it to change their name again. So I thought that was really funny.
Because they didn't Spinal Tap go on to call themselves then the Tamesmen?
Something like that. Yeah.
And then went to Spinal Tap.
You would know more than I would, but yes. Okay. So, according to the official IMDb page, how many band members have been a part of This Is Spinal Tap?
37.
37, right? Jesus. Okay. All right. Spinal Tap has made 2 appearances on The Simpsons show. Of course, we talked about Harry Shearer has been on The Simpsons for a long time. He was in this film, obviously, as the bassist. Can you name which 2 years Spinal Tap as a whole band made an appearance on The Simpsons?
Oh, and The Simpsons, I don't know. I would say, I'm going to guess at 88 and 92.
You were half right. You got 92 was dead on, and 1989. So you were just 1 year off
by a year. Oh, not bad.
So you were right there.
Not bad.
Okay, so Rob Reiner, we talked about him a little bit at the beginning of the show.
Yep.
He wrote most of this show and directed it, or most of this movie, rather. Mm-hmm. He has a really long career with tons of credits and dozens of projects, really diverse. Awesome guy, lots of talent. However, he has only ever been nominated for 1 Academy Award. Can you name the film that he was nominated for?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't think it was When Harry Met Sally. No, it's got to be Misery. I'll go with Misery.
It was actually 1993's A Few Good Men.
Oh, yes, right.
Yep.
Oh, right on.
Yep.
Good movie.
Okay,
Man,
so
that's a good movie.
I haven't seen it. Surprising.
What?
No one.
You haven't seen that? Oh my God, Yancy, you would love that movie. It's really good.
Okay, so in the early drafts and scripts of the film,
Yep.
What was the band's first name going to be?
Oh, like the original script before they actually came
This is
out?
a little bit of a trick question, but yes.
I don't know.
It was Spinal Tap, but it was actually spelled Spynal.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah. I don't know if you can tell this, judging from past episodes, but I spent a lot of time on trivia this week. I'm so glad.
I know, that's good. Yo, you definitely did. And you're stumping me, too, so that's good.
Okay, so you were talking about cameos. I know you know this, but can you name the 2 actors that played the mimes, Morty and the other one that I don't think they actually remember? They don't mention his name.
Billy Crystal was Morty, but Dana Carvey was the other one.
Okay, so you nailed that as well.
Yeah.
Let me see if I have any other ones real quick. Normally, I'm so used, Chris, to whenever we're talking about this, you basically rattle off probably 60%. Yeah.
There was some good. Just to go into cameos for a second. I mean, Patrick McNee was in it. He was Sir Dennis Eaton Hogg, and he was probably best known for the Avengers TV show back in the '60s. So you wouldn't know who that is. Also, Artie Fufkin was Paul Schaefer, which you probably knew from the the world's most dangerous band, and Paul Benedict from the Jeffersons and the Goodbye Girl. He was in it. I thought he was really funny, and of course Fred Willard. And he's done other mockumentaries with Christopher Guest, like Waiting for Guffman, especially Best in Show. Like, he was so good at Best in Show, Fred Willard.
I need to watch that, don't I?
Oh, God, it was really funny. I had never seen it, believe it or not, until a couple years ago. I was on a plane somewhere. I was flying to, I think I was going to Vegas for the Podcast Awards, and I watched it on the plane, and I was like, wow, I can't believe it's taken me this long to watch this movie. It was phenomenal. Really, really, really good. But Waiting for Guffman has always been a favorite of mine. It is so funny. Oh, God, it's just brutal. Again, I think the thing is, like Waiting for Guffman is kind of like Spinal Tap in the sense that it kind of plays on the fact of people that are just not quite famous, but just wish they were, or they had this, like, desire to be famous. And the same thing with Best in Show, I think it plays as well. You know, kind of Small Potatoes being like a dog trainer at the Westminster show, but to them it's kind of like a celebrity thing.
Super Bowl.
And it's like within that world they're kind of famous, and it's just, I don't know, there's just these themes that kind of keep recurring that I just think are very, I don't know, there's just something about them that are kind of very special. They kind of cut close to the bone. They're very good. Bruno Kirby was in it as well. He was a limo driver. Remember when he was talking about Sinatra and all that kind of stuff, and you know, Fran Drescher, as you mentioned, you know, man, it was good. Archie Hahn, most people don't remember Archie Hahn, but Archie Hahn was a comedy guy from the 70s too. But anything else? Sorry, you had another one?
I was going to mention one about the Bruno Kirby character. He played Tommy Piscetta, the cab driver. Yes. And it's kind of weird, too. If you look at him in the face, whenever I first saw him, I didn't know where I knew him from. He looks like an older Edward Norton. I don't know if you can see that.
Does. Yeah, I guess I could see that. You know, he was young when he did this movie, but, you know, obviously best known for, like, City Slickers and stuff like that. So, but I don't know, all in all, I mean, like I say, it's I guess they're not all, you know, huge hits with you, but I hope you at least enjoyed it. At the very least, Yancy, now you can at least say, and that's really what a lot of this podcast is about, that you can kind of go and say, I've seen that. You know what I mean? Yes, I have seen that movie, and you know, and for Millennial, good on you for doing that. So I think that's great. So now comes the part of the show where you've got to throw a title at me. So what are we going to watch for next week and come back? What's the Millennial film that we're going to spin this around and do next week?
So we're going to be watching a film that I took my wife to see a couple of years ago in theaters. Surprising no one, it is a science fiction film, and it's Ex Machina from 2015.
Wow. I've never even heard of that movie before.
It is good. I honestly think you're going to like this, Chris. This isn't going to be like Moon or District 9 where you're kind of, you know, struggling to find out like what it's about. I think you're really, really going to enjoy this film.
That being said, I mean, I really liked District 9. I thought it was really good. Okay. But Moon I didn't like. Moon I didn't like at all. If I never saw that movie again for the rest of my life, I could lead a perfectly wonderful, happy life. But no, I thought District 9 was pretty good. So Ex Machina is the one.
Ex Machina.
Is anyone in it that I've ever heard of?
Sam Rockwell. I don't know if you've seen him in some other films. He played.
Yeah, you made me watch friggin' Moon with him in it. I mean, just I can go back to the well again with this guy.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. You're talking about Ex Machina.
Yeah, Ex Machina.
Oscar Isaac. You know, the pilot from Star Wars, most recent Star Wars. He's in a bunch of films actually, but yeah, he's in it. And then I can't remember the character's name, but he is he's like a redheaded English actor. He was actually in Star Wars 2, ironically. He's in the film as well. So it was one of those like fly under the radar. It wasn't like a huge commercial success, but it's on a lot of critics' lists. If you look on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, it has a near perfect score. It is a really, really interesting film.
So kind of like This Is Spinal Tap. It kind of came out to very little fanfare, but it's very, very highly touted by the critics and by fans.
Yep.
So. All right,
exactly.
We'll do that next week. All right, until then, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at @CMcBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.